Today's episode of Half Wit is proudly brought to you by the Weekly 50 Quiz. Now, I have been a bit slack in completing the quizzes over the last month or so, but with it being a new year, get yourself into a Friday evening or a Saturday morning Weekly 50 Quiz routine, or even better, get along to one of the 45 different Weekly 50 Quiz nights around the state that are held each week. Check them out on Instagram at The Weekly 50 or on their website, theweekly50 FIFTY.com.au. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another year of the Matt Whitford podcast. I hope you all had a lovely Christmas and celebrated the new year in style. I'm going to be honest, I cleaned up on Christmas morning. I'm now the very proud owner of a port barrel, along with a pair of Birkenstocks. And look, if you can't beat them, join them. As well as a few Elite 11 t-shirts, which all the young kids are wearing these days. And I also got a dozen Callaway triple track golf balls, which, they will probably only last 2 or 3 rounds, I believe. I do want to give a quick shout out to Kimbo, who welcomed little Cleo into the world. Kimbo was on episode 7 of Half Wit and episode 12, along with midwife Georgia, talking all things pregnancy, and we wish Kimbo and Jared all the best with young Cleo. Today's episode with Amanda Schultz is a 2-part episode. In 1981, Amanda's father, Geoff Whitford, a police inspector at the time, disappeared and was later found dead with a gunshot wound to the head. It was labelled a suicide, but as you're about to listen to, Amanda gives a very compelling case that it wasn't. Enjoy part A of episode 17 with Amanda Schultz. Amanda Schultz, welcome to Half Wit.
Thank you, Matt.
And thank you for having me in your lovely Kadina home on the York Peninsula, part of the Copper Triangle. Is that correct?
Correct. So we've got Kadina, Wallaroo and Moonta. So a pretty nice spot in South Australia.
I was going to say the Iron Triangle, but that's Wyala, Port Pirie, Port Augusta, a long way away from here. So you moved up here 30 years ago and you've never left?
Yeah, I married a local, and you learn pretty quickly that they don't want to go back towards the city when they've got a great regional centre to, not just for them, but to bring up the kids as well.
I reckon if I came to Kadina and not Wyala, I probably would have stayed here as well. So you did move up as a police officer, which we'll talk about later. But Amanda, we are related. So you were born Amanda Whitford. We share the same great-grandparents, Henry and Myrtle Whitford. And they had 5 children, which was probably the standard for back in the day. So they had Max, which is my grandfather, Reg, your grandfather, as well as Keith, Doris, and Rita. And my dad Bruce was cousins with your father Geoff, a South Australian police officer who passed away on October the 22nd, 1981. And that is why we are here today, Amanda, to chat about the circumstances and the details of Geoff's death, a death that was labelled a suicide, and something that your mother, your 2 sisters, and you have had to deal with and try and process over the last 44 years it is. So can I begin by asking you, Amanda, at what stage was it when you started to begin questioning the details surrounding your dad's death?
Yeah, so just going straight to it, I decided with an ex-journalist, if you like, to meet my dad through writing a book, because having lost my dad when I was 9, I really didn't have my own memories. And I had a lot of family memories, but didn't really understand why everyone said he was a good bloke. So I thought I'd go around and ask people. And there was predominantly the majority of the people that I caught up with were retired police officers. And just their whole versions of what led to that day in question when he passed, as well as what actually happened that day in relation to them finding him. There was a lot of variances were starting to occur, and we really were just scratching our heads a lot of the times and just, I suppose, just gathering all the information and trying to see what would we make of it towards the end. It was like a bit of a puzzle, like a jigsaw, and pulling the pieces together. And that's how it started.
So let's go back, and we'll probably chop and change throughout this episode. But let's go back to October the 21st, 1981. You're 9 years old. You're in grade 4 at Mount Barker Primary School. You get on the bus from school to head home to the farm, at Wistow, just out of Mount Barker. You hop off the bus and begin walking up the dirt road towards your house when you're greeted by television cameras, and basically your life is never to be the same. What was that like?
Yeah, for me, it is pretty vague. I think it was very much, you got sort of thrown around, go there, do this, have that. I was probably sheltered a fair bit from what was really happening. So once I saw Mum, I clearly remember walking into the lounge room and Mum was standing at a window in the lounge room looking down over the dam, and I said to Mum, "Why are all these people here?" And she said, "Oh, they're just getting around us. We're not sure where your dad is." And I said, "Oh, I thought maybe we're having a barbecue because everyone's at our place." And she said, "Well, we probably will, love." And pretty much after that, I went with my best friend's parents or family and sort of shipped off to their place to stay the night and be removed from all the goings on at the house where there was a lot of people.
So Dad, Geoff Whit, as he was called, he grew up in Prospect. He joined the police cadets in 1959 as a 16-year-old, graduated in 1962 as a 19-year-old. March the next year, your dad and your mum, Pam, marry as teenagers, and soon after, your elder sister, Julie, was born. Can you tell us quickly, Amanda, about Geoff's rise through the police ranks?
Yeah, so again, this was very much learned through Mum, but also confirmed with a number of police that had worked with him right back until the Prospect days. So Dad originally was in head office and on patrols. He then moved to Prospect CIB as a detective, and then he decided he would give more of a country area a bit of a dip. And funnily enough, he was offered 2 positions. There was Kadina CIB, or there was Mount Barker, which was going to be an inaugural CIB. So it didn't exist. They were going to be starting a new office with 2 new Ds, as they call them, detectives. So he weighed up the distance to town and everything, and he ended up choosing Mount Barker. So he was transferred to Mount Barker to start the first CIB there and moved the family to Mount Barker, and the house was just on the next block from the Mount Barker Primary.
Yeah. So, it was detective, later detective sergeant, and later on an inspector. So
yeah,
if we go back to the mid to late 70s and early 80s, Amanda, is it fair to say that there was a bit of corruption within the South Australian Police Force?
It is very fair to say that, although it's still very much hidden secrets, if you like. If I had $1 for every retiree police officer that said, "Well, I'll tell you this, but it's off the record," or they would give me scenarios or examples, but not name anyone. Back then, police, to an extent, sort of made their own rules, and they felt quite comfortable when it involved crooks, because I sort of see in their mind they weren't actually causing any pain or inconvenience to the general public or the community.
It's crazy to think that. Well, hopefully that's obviously not going on right now, some of the corrupt within the police force. But I remember you telling me, Amanda, about, when Dad was rising up through the ranks, heroin was big in South Australia in those 70s and 80s, and how, sometimes police officers, they'd arrest heroin dealers, they'd lie and say they only found half of what they did, and they'd keep the other half for themselves, recirculate it, make more money off it, and everyone was getting a cut. They had each other's back, and Amanda and I chatted on the phone it went for 3 hours. I felt it went for half an hour, Amanda. Next minute, we've been chatting for 3 hours, basically. But remember you saying how, your dad would take his jacket off at the pub, put it on his chair, and then, have a few drinks and come back to it later. There'd be money in his suit jacket. It's crazy to think that happened.
Yeah, there was a core of police that I understand were really doing the wrong thing. They really were. And again, in their mind, these guys had lived together 3 or 4 years at Fort Largs, and it became almost like a cult. There was these learned behaviours that you did this, you didn't do that to fit in. And if you didn't fit in, you were on the outer lookout. So there was methods and ways that they got other coppers to be a part of these wrongful activities. And as you said, a copper could get pretty hammered, wake up the next day, got money on him. How's he going to explain that? Who's he going to go to? Very much the same. Is a heroin dealer going to stand up in court and say, excuse me, Your Honour, but I actually had a lot more drugs than that when the police did my house over?
Yeah.
No. So they were able to do things really that, as long as they did it carefully and quietly, everyone let it go. They just turned a blind eye to it.
Yeah, and to paint a bit of a picture, Amanda, there's a movie called American Gangster. We were chatting about it before, with Russell Crowe and Denzel Washington, and it's got a real stark contrast, I think, to what it was like in South Australia in the 70s and 80s. Going back to Geoff, he was promoted to the head of J1 in 1980. Can you explain to our listeners what J1 was and what Geoff's role was?
So just going back a bit there, Matt, Dad, he always wanted to be one of the boys, and I grew up knowing that he was everyone's best mate, but he didn't have a best mate. And that was part of my motive as to why this book was getting written. So when he first went to Adelaide and left Mount Barker CIB, he went to major crime, and then he went to drug squad. And so I was, no secret as to what drug squad's role was. He was then approached the next thing in his career to become a boss and to do the boss's course. Now, he wasn't really sure about that at all. He was pretty 50-50. He wanted to be one of the boys, right? So him and another mate of his, literally, and I still laugh and smile when I think about it, they flipped a coin. If it's heads, we'll do the boss's course. If it's tails, we won't. Or around the other way. They flipped it. Yes, we're going to do the course. So he didn't really have his heart in it, but he did the course. During that course, Dad's cousin, Colin Whitford, who was also a copper, unfortunately, he had a bad accident, a fatal car accident near Meadows. And Dad did not cope with that well at all. So he actually put in his resignation from the course and said, no, I can't deal with it. I'm in too much of an emotional mess. I don't need it. Anyway, they told him to go away for the weekend, go and enjoy with some mates, go and have some beers. He comes back, gave them his resignation from the course, and they ripped it up and said, we'll just sign you off. When he got through the course, the normal induction, if you like, to being a commissioned officer, so an inspector, was you went and did your cadetship, if you like, at a patrol base, where you were dealing with managing people and budgets and, complaints and issues and all those management type of KPIs, if you like. and he was advised he would be the boss at Port Adelaide, which he wasn't really rapt about because Mount Barker to Port Adelaide was a fair trek. And then last minute, he was told, no, you're not going uniform patrol base. We've had a restructure in Angus Street, which was head office, and we're redoing our crime team. So that's when they created this. There was J1, J2, K1 and K2, and they all had a different focus, if you like. And so Dad was head of J1, which was a crime investigation team. And he was back leading his old team from his drug squad team, which straight up, my mum will tell you, before he even stepped in that office, he felt very uncomfortable about being his mate's boss. And that's where he got up to, before things started to spiral.
So why was he uncomfortable?
And that comes back a lot to family values. He was an absolute perfectionist. And those that knew Dad would still say to now, he was well renowned for having a tie on every day and his shoes had to be polished. He was driven by how he was perceived by others. And it was always around what will others think of me? What am I seen as being? What am I doing? What am I how am I going to be one of the boys? And he felt that he was going to lose that privilege to be a team man and be sitting up there on his own, actually having to watch probably a lot of things that he knew when he was part of the boys. He was able to just shrug the shoulders, but now to be their boss, what was that line now between ignoring things and acting on things?
And it's hard to put both the hats on, isn't it? You can't 1 minute be one of the boys and then be their boss. It's not that I'm comparing myself, but as a football coach, I used to be a player and I'd have all my teammates, and then I became a player coach, and it was, 5 years ago, I used to be all for this, but now I've actually got to tell people off for doing this. So it's clear, Amanda, that once Geoff's taken up the role in J1, it's putting him in a bit of a tricky position in regards to some of the colleagues that are working under him. If we just go back to the night before your dad's disappearance, so on October the 20th, he catches up with a colleague, Norm Colquist, at the Great Eastern Hotel in Littlehampton. Was it fair to say, Amanda, that your dad was a little uneasy, or there was something that was bothering him, or something that was on his mind?
He was very stressed at that time. And Mum has shared with me how there was a number of occasions where he came home very on edge, very uptight, not able to sleep, and physically upset to the point that one night he actually sat on the bed with his head in his hands crying.
Yep.
He said to Mum straight up, there's boys on my old team that are corrupt. And Mum straight out knew exactly who it was and named them. And Mum has this sixth sense. She just feels good or not good around particular people. So when him and Norm had this catch up on that given night, my understanding is, yes, they had quite a few beers. Dad was basically trying to offload a lot of his worries and concerns and all the things that he was feeling, because Norm he'd been at Mount Barker CIB with Dad. Dad had been best mate in his wedding, so he was more than just a workmate. And some would say that, like, SA Police in general and the media very much grabbed hold of the fact that Dad was going to be in the Adelaide Magistrates Court that following morning in relation to giving evidence about a fellow copper that had been found having dope in his locker. So a lot of saying that was the whole reason for Dad,
So your dad wasn't actually giving evidence, but he was meant to be in court the next morning to support a police officer that had, busted another police officer with marijuana in their locker.
Yeah.
And it's, if we go to the October 21, the day that your dad went missing, he was due to be in court at 10:30. He doesn't show up. Now, there's lots of conflicting stories about what actually happened, and you've spoken to a lot of people that were there on the day, and there's that officer, I believe, says he spoke to Geoff at 10 o'clock on the phone, and that officer, I remember you telling me earlier, he said that phone call wasn't to a person who was going to commit suicide.
Yeah, so on that map, there was a uniformed copper that had been, I don't know if we call him a whistleblower, but he was the one that had been mic'd to actually have the conversation with the copper.
So like wired up or?
Wired.
Yep.
And Dad had a lot of paranoia at that time. He was struggling with trust. Who do you trust? Where do you go to? Who's on my team? Who's not? So he was pretty mixed up as far as who to trust. So he had his normal, what we call MO, modus operandus, was he would drive down towards the middle of Mount Barker and use a phone box.
Yep.
Because he truly believed that our phone was being tapped. And so the given morning of the court matter, he called a witness who was a young, fresh patrolman that had been wired, hadn't been in the job really long, and said to him, "Mate, how are you feeling? What are your thoughts? Anything you want to run by with me?" And basically said to him, "I think the best prep we can do is I'll meet you at the courts, courtroom 12 or whatever, at 9:45 this morning, and we'll go through your notes again and I'll brief you, and we'll just see that you're comfortable. Is there anything you're concerned about?" And he said, "Yeah, boss, do I get up and give everything that happened, or do I not talk about the wired undercover sort of things that we did and show up how we do things in police intel?" And Dad said, "No, you got to give them the lot. You got to say what you did, you wired, all this kind of stuff." So anyway, skipping ahead, that policeman contacted me when I was writing the book and said, "It's very hard for me to describe this to you, but there was no way your dad would ring me, care about briefing me for my court appearance, and make arrangements to meet me if he was contemplating taking his own life that day."
It just doesn't add up.
It doesn't add up. And the other thing, going back to your didn't rock up to court and rang, court was 10:30. He rang his boss at 8 a.m. according to the boss.
Yep.
The boss said he rang at 8 and said he's got car troubles. He might be late for court. Now, I don't know about you, Matt, but if you were ringing as a boss for a court matter and saying you got car trouble, wouldn't you just organise a patrol car to go and pick him up and running down to, Victoria Square? And
it's almost like someone had got to him and said, "Call in, you're having car trouble," because that same car was supposedly later spotted driving towards Maiponga Beach. So,
and then on that, since that time, a police officer's wife has come forward saying they drove down Mount Barker Freeway, as it was then, and her two kids were saying, "There's Mr. Whitford," because their dad was a policeman with him, and they were waving at him driving his cream Valiant, pulled up alongside him at the toll gate at Portrush, Glen Osmond Road.
Yep.
At 8:30 that morning.
There's a lot of things not adding up, and if we go to 10:30 when the court case is meant to begin, and then Geoff's not there, And then, 10 minutes after, so at 10:40, a statewide search is issued for your dad and his unmarked police car, the cream-coloured Valiant sedan. It just doesn't make sense. It screams foul play. And I guess that leads into the next, and this, this is a question that could go on forever, but how and where was your dad found?
So the very first thing that apparently happened was the bosses came into the Angus Street office where all the boys were, coffee morning, typing, whatever they were doing. And one of the chief superintendents said he had an announcement to make, pulled all the boys in and said, look, Whit's missing and we're looking for him now as we speak. And I probably had 3 or 4 of what I would say were the good guys say that they went to kit up. So kit up meant either put your holster on your hip or your holster around your calf, and get your radio, get your keys, off you go. And so as they've all gone to grab their equipment to kit up, they were given a, whoa, you guys are all got plenty of typing to do here today. We don't want everyone out scalping the whole countryside. The bosses have all got it in hand. We'll let you know when there's any change. And so a lot of those police are like, they knew then it was just not right. It was, that was their mate, and they felt very frustrated about being treated that way.
It's almost like the good cops, dad's mates that he trusted, they were the ones that, whoever organised all this was like, we don't want them looking. And they left it to the dodgy or the corrupt cops to then, try and frame a suicide. And this is where Amanda, I've read the book named Wit, which you co-wrote with Greg Mayfield, a former advertiser journalist, and I've watched you on Channel 9's Under Investigation, which can be found on 9 now, I believe it is. So
and YouTube.
On YouTube, and I've watched it multiple times, and it's just if we fast forward to, later on that day, and you get home from your school, like we spoke about earlier, dad's missing, and then, basically, the next day he's found at Maiponga Beach, and he didn't like the beach, did he?
No, he was a river boy.
Yep. So he's found at a beach that he's never really been to before, in an alleged suicide. So are you able to give some details, Amanda, of, I guess, what you now know, looking back? Obviously, at the time, you're a 9-year-old and, you didn't really exactly know. You thought dad might be coming home soon. But, there's so many stories, Amanda, and so many conflicting stories of the foul play. It was a setup. Someone wanted your father killed.
So dad was actually beckoned or seconded, or however you want to, whatever words you want to make, that there was a pending investigation into SA Police, and there was going to be an inquiry, and it involved corruption, some lawyers, some politicians, police, cartels. And it was around that time, where there was the big names, the Roger Rogersons of Victoria, Sydney.
One of the most dodgiest cops ever.
And some guys on Dad's team, it wasn't unusual for Rogerson to come over and visit SA, and they all would hang out together, to the point that a couple of guys on Dad's team would actually go over to his place. Apparently he had the house next door as well, and they go and stay there for weeks at a time. So he was deemed to be one of the boys.
Yep.
So just going to that particular day, again, I'm not sure what actually happened between Dad either leaving Angus Street office or not. there are other coppers that have said he was actually in the office that morning. He didn't just ring up and not rock up for court. But as far as the police are concerned, there was a butcher called Rex Fountain. Rex had a butcher shop next door to the Hundorf Inn where Dad drank. Mum worked for Rex doing his bookwork, and Rex and Shirley had their own butcher shop. Now, they moved to Maiponga and had a butcher shop in the main street. And they hadn't been there long before October 1981. And according to SA Police, Rex has gone out the front of the shop in the morning and he's washing out the bowl from the sausages, and he's looked up in time to see Dad's car go past the Cream Valley Inn. And in his version is that Dad put his hand up to the side of his face, almost as to not to be seen. And so he thought that was really quite unusual because Dad was such a social sort of bloke. So he went and said to his wife, Shirley, I reckon that was Whit that just drove past and he didn't wave. He said, that's not like him. I wonder what's going on with him. And this was mid-morning. Now,
Can I just cut you off there for a second? That sounds like, it was probably definitely your dad's car, but it sounds like it wasn't your dad driving.
Potentially, yeah.
Like,
yep.
I'm for our listeners out there, I've been thinking about this and you've been thinking about it for a lot longer than me, but I'm getting ideas in my head. Was Dad in the boot? Was Dad in the back seat? Was someone else driving the car?
Correct. So they didn't think much of it all day. Now, police have said that when they announced the state search, that Rex Fountain called the local police and said that he'd seen Whit and that he described that he turned as if to go down to what was known as Pebble Beach at Maiponga. Now, for a start, the turn off to Pebble Beach is not within eyesight of
the butcher.
And Rex and Shirley are very accurate on when they moved there because they can map that date in relation to when their son had turned 21. So they'd only been there a number of weeks. They hadn't even seen the beach themselves. And so apparently it's that sighting and that information as to why SA Police started to look around the Maiponga area for Whit and ended up going to the beach where his car was found between the shacks. Now, Rex's version is he didn't do anything with that information or sighting because he had been in the shop all day and he did not know that Whit was missing. It wasn't until the evening news, say around 6 o'clock, that he sees headlines, police inspector, missing, statewide search. So he's turned to Shirley and said, what do I do? And she said, well, you've got to ring in and, let the police know what you saw this morning. And he's turned back to her and said, I'm not real comfortable doing this because he'd been a witness in a murder trial some years before and found it horrendous as to how witnesses are, interviewed and interrogated, if you like, in the stand. So it was
and the follow-up and the fear that can come from giving evidence.
So he didn't want to get involved pretty much, and he didn't know what he was getting involved in. So they've decided between them, yes, he better report it, but he would bring up as a anonymous fisherman and not use his name. So that's what he did. So if all these years later, all along the way, we led to believe that Rex Fountain had seen Dad drive past the shop and go straight down the beach, which is obviously just near the shop. And that's why police knew where to find him. So whatever happened, I then learned that who the 4 coppers were that were the ones who found Dad, and that they were sent there from head office to go and search this area based on what the fishermen told them, which He didn't, but that's what they were saying. Now, without going into too much detail, I interviewed all four of them separately. So there was, two pairs, if you like.
Yep.
And their recollections and their descriptions were vastly different on what two are saying they saw and where they found Dad to the other two. I started realizing that this stuff was just didn't feel right.
Yep.
And I was getting quite uptight and angst about it. But I decided that, do you know what? Just keep asking questions as though you're the inquisitive daughter wanting to meet their dad, and let them give you information, and then you work it out. If I start going in, interviewing people and interrogating them and questioning their inconsistencies, I'm going to have everyone shut the door and nobody's going to talk to Amanda Whitford ever. So I did play the innocent daughter.
Play a bit dumb as well, as in, yep.
Yeah, I played it up going, oh, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing. Oh, so where did you, and how did you cope with finding Dad like that? And I was getting these descriptions and these times and unbelievable. And I'd come out and then I'd meet up. So I'd go and do all the interviewing with Dad's cousin Ron, who was also a retired detective at police, and then get all the information. Then I'd meet with Greg, who was a journalist and then was the editor of the Recorder at Port Pirie at this time. And then he'd write the story. I'd get the notes, he'd write the story. And some weeks he'd go, oh my God, that is the best. Can't wait to write this chapter. Because it was almost becoming, like you say, an American film where we're like pitching ourselves going, are you for real?
So the conflicting evidence of your dad, where he was found, that's the big part where for me it screams there's no other plausible explanation than Geoff's body was moved and placed. So you were saying before there were the four police officers that found your father. When there were photos taken of you, and may I just add in as well, it was late at night, Dad was found, and it was all done in pitch black, and by the next morning at sunlight, everything's gone, like it never happened. If that happened these days, there would be so many more people down there. It would be cordoned off. What I don't, and this is what you're probably been grappling with as well, Amanda, is that your mum Pam was shown a set of photos from the crime scene. And then later on, you and your cousin Ron were shown different photos of your dad in a different position.
So going back, Julie was 19. She was nursing. Mum was only 37 when she lost her husband. So to me now, that's really young, me being in my 50s. They didn't cope, right? Mum had gone to counselling. Julie and Mum were worried because of the type of work he was doing. Had he been taken into state? Was he incognito? Was he, what? They needed closure. So the welfare branch had been working with Mum, and it was decided that they would come and pick the whole family up. I have no recollection of this, but I was there. Take us to the coroner's office and see photos of Dad's body. Dead, right? To reassure the family that, yes, he is gone. And this is where he was gone, and this was at Maiponga. So I don't remember the photos, but you've got Mum and Julie remember them clear as.
And Julie's 19.
Julie was 19. So let's say it was 12 months later or 6 months later. She was around 20.
Yep.
And they will clearly tell you right to this day, and anyone that knows Pam Whitford, she's still got her head switched on. She's still got her marbles, trust me.
How old is she now, Pam?
She's 81.
Yep.
Almost 80. She'll be 82 in February. And they will say that Dad was lying on his back on what looked like a slight incline in sort of a bit of a dirty sort of dark dirt,
Yep.
if you like, on the side of a hill with almost like a prickle bush,
Yep.
like a big, just wild bush, with his right arm directly out in right angles to his body. So almost as though you were reaching out for something.
Yep.
And his left arm was by his side. So he's flat on his back, head towards the right-hand side.
Like he's holding his right arm out like a no ball in cricket. He's holding his arm out to the side.
Correct. And they saw that photo from a number of angles.
Yep.
So it was one bush, side of a hill, reddy coloured dirt with the left arm down. Now, that's what they've lived with for 40-odd years. What Ron and I saw was Dad a little bit more to his side with his head dropped to the left side with almost a little bit tilted to his left side with his right arm and left arm both straight down against his thighs, so both arms down with his right hand clenched and the firearm in the soft sand, pretty well buried in soft sand.
Yeah.
And
just
rocks and soft sand. So he was down amongst the rocks that you would have where the water meets the beach. And they were the boulder rocks, almost where you'd say to people, don't climb in there because it's a bit dangerous. You could get swept off.
So he's been moved.
He's been moved, and he's been moved like completely different settings. There's not even, that rock looks different from that position. No, we've got dirt and grass bush there, almost prickles. And then down here we're in soft white sand with head within boulders. And we've seen coloured pictures now.
Was it taken the photos were taken at night with a flash, I'm assuming?
That's the thing. The notes and the actual coroner's statement as to what was found and what was done at the location is so sparse and limited. It's quite humorous as to what was or wasn't.
And this is not just a homeless person off the street committing suicide. This is Inspector Geoff Whitford, a very high up member of the South Australian Police Force, and it was just done so hastily.
And apparently, they found his car in daylight, which was parked between two shacks. Apparently, and this was in the notes, there was a number of cigarette butts by the car of different brands. So one might be Wingfield and one might be Escort. I'm not sure how many people carry around two brands of smokes. But we had two pairs looking, and eventually they started door knocking, and it was a local resident down there, got his torch out, and they walked along this goat track, and apparently that's where they then realised that Dad's body was there. They sent him back, and then they walked up the hill to an actual homestead and used the phone because they were keeping minimal details on the police radios because of the tapping in the media.
Yep.
But you're 100% there, Matt. Like, I too have been a police officer, and you just didn't do things. The worst job in the world was you had to stand by at a crime scene. Didn't matter if it was a ram raid in a shop or a
terrorist,
or a damn murder or a suicide.
Yep.
To investigate things properly, you preserved the scene until the experts arrived on scene in the daytime so they can actually do what they need to do to gather evidence under the best circumstances.
I'm skipping forward a little bit here, but we will get back to this because this is where it's still... I hope the people listening are, feeling the way we are at the moment about how this just doesn't add up. But when you're a police officer for 15 years, and was it during this time, Amanda, where you started really being like, why wasn't my dad's investigation done properly?
No, had no idea. As far as I'm concerned, I had 100 coppers say, I knew your dad, he was a great man. It was so sad that he took his life. And so I've lived my whole life, probably just being in part of my living. I would say to people, so when I was younger, people would say to me, however the conversation get there, and you'd say your dad had died, and they'd say, oh, how did he die? I'd say he was a policeman and he was shot. Because no one used that S word.
Yep.
Suicide was not anything. And still to this day, people find it selfish, shameful, embarrassing, depending on your family values, your religion, whatever. It's still judged at times as being
weak.
And a lot of people don't understand it. Okay. So I used to just get away with trying to make it like he was a hero. I just didn't say who pulled the trigger. He was just shot.
Yep.
And I would left it at that. Then when I joined the job, all these people said, great, 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 great. And there's a couple that I looked back and said, one day when I'm not wearing this uniform, I'll have a chat to you about your dad. And I didn't really give that much thought. I just sort of thought, oh yeah, again, what sort of bloke he was, or what was he sort of working on, but still not thinking anything down that perhaps foul play road. And that's where I've almost had to go through, as my sisters and mum have, reinventing what is this story? What, like, trying after 40 years where you've lived with this particular crime scene and method and reasoning and his why and all these kind of things, that he was depressed because he was being asked to investigate other coppers and all this kind of stuff. All of a sudden it's like, oh my God, are you for real? And if there was two things that stood out to me that really poked the bear. So the first one was when I was writing the book and I learned who the 4 coppers were that were involved in the search. There was a couple here, actually. One of them gave me a lot of detail of what happened. Another one told me that the 4 of them were actually ordered to meet Dad's boss at the Victor Hotel at Victor Harbour, where they had lunch, would you mind, before the boss said, I've got some good information that you'll find we at my Bahonga Beach. Off you go. So that was the first thing that it was like, hang on, the butcher, what about the butcher? So that was the first. The next thing was when I contacted one of these 4, I learned that he lived in Queensland and that he had cancer. And so I had a great chat with him. He was lovely. He said to me, I'm not going to be long for this world. You need to know what happened that day, but it's not something that you want to hear on the phone. So he told me he'd fly to Adelaide for us to have a proper catch up. So I was like, didn't sleep well for a few nights. Like my angst was through the roof, thinking, here's that missing piece. It's coming. Like I was just, so we decided to meet O'Connell Street, one of the hangouts where the detectives would have all had a nice Italian meal. They might shout for lunch. So I've met this particular copper and we've had lunch. I've looked at him and I said, okay, hit me with it. He said, well, I'm not sure what you mean, love. I said, well, you told me you were going to give me information about Dad. And he said, well, I really wanted you to know while I'm still standing. He was amazing. He was the best copper ever. We thought he was a good boss and he was doing a great job.
You've already known this. You know this already.
And I wanted you to know how much he thought of you girls, how much he adored you and loved you. He talked about you all the time. And I remember, like, I couldn't swallow. I just felt quite ill. I thought, what? Like, hang on, what have I missed here? So we kept talking and then I said something and he said, yeah, well, I caught up with some of the old boys last night for a beer or two. And I thought, oh my God, they got to him. And so with that, we finished lunch and he got back on the plane and flew back to Queensland, and not many months later, he passed over.
Do you almost feel like, in a way, he might have already been catching up with the old boys and he'd planned to catch up with you just to let you know and just to reassure you or tell you again that it was a suicide? And
well,
or did they get to him?
I think he genuinely was coming to see me.
Yep.
And they got to him because I had another retired police officer that asked to see me who was with cancer.
Yep.
And his wife stopped it. So we had a time and a date ready. Wife said, no, he doesn't need this in his dying days. I'm really sorry, but I'm not going to allow it. But the other one, so of those four, I'd spoken to one of them on the phone who had said to me, so there was 4 letters that Dad had written, apparently.
Letters, suicide notes.
One to Mum, one to his mum, one to his immediate boss, and one to one of the assistant commissioners. So until this time, we only knew the contents of Mum's.
Yep.
So when I rang this other copper, he was one of the 4 to find him, said to me, now you do know about the 5th note, don't you? What 5th note? Oh, no, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Maybe I didn't remember that right. So there was these bits, right, that just didn't make sense. This other copper, a lot of them, I'm on a retired police page and there's some great stories and some great blokes, and quite a few have personally messaged me. No, not just on that page, just through friend of a friend of a friend. When they heard I was writing a book, they wanted to help me. And anyway, he started really showing a lot of interest in what I was doing with the book, and he'd ring me and we'd have chats, and I started to feel that he was trying to grab some intel. He was getting nosy, and
Yep.
he loved her. He was going to be the fisher that would go back to the boys and say, be careful, she's onto this. So
yep.
He said to me, because a lot of retired police, they do retire by the water. They love their fishing. And so there's quite a few on the York Peninsula and Moonta Bay, Port Hughes in particular. So this copper said to me, every morning you'll find us down in the Port Hughes general store for coffee. So I rolled in this morning, just happened to roll in at the time when they were there. And I've introduced myself. Hey, I'm Amanda Whitford. And some of them went white because there was 6 of them there. And the one that had been calling me, he said, come over here, my love. Come over here, my love. And he pointed across the table to one of the 4 that I'd spoken to, and he was the one with the 5th note. I said, I've been wanting to catch up with you. When I learned you were up here, I thought we needed to have a second chat about things. So I'm talking to the other one, and next minute, the one with the notes got up and left the table. And I've said to this bloke, where's he gone? He said, he's probably going to take his dog for a walk. Yeah, the dog's tied up out the front. Like he couldn't get out of that place quick enough. There's no way he could look at me and talk to me. And meanwhile, the guy that I'd been talking to all the time on the phone, we're chatting away and how's things going with your dad? And he's grabbed me by both hands and he said, I've heard a little rumour that you think that your dad's suicide was more than that it was, not things didn't happen that way. I said, oh, where'd you hear that from? Oh, just, some of the boys are saying that you're asking a lot of questions. He said, listen here, my love, if I can give you any advice, you've got your own life, you've got your young family, you've got, a lot of things going for you. Why do you want to put yourself through all this? Let me reassure you, your dad was a great bloke. He was put under too much pressure at a young age, and he thought he was doing the right thing. There was no foul play. And in fact, the word murder's been used. You need to know that is not the case. And I just nodded, storing all this stuff again, and I'd come home and I'd write it all down with the date and time. Like we've got like what we call running sheets from the very first time we spoke to anyone right until yesterday. I've got everything recorded. And anyway, excuse to your viewers, but I'd built a rapport with this guy and I trusted him a little bit, but I knew he was using my info. So I sort of thought, again, I'll play along. I'm the innocent daughter. And I said, thank you. Thanks for easing my mind that it is just a straight out suicide. And he says, here, give me a hug. So I've leant down and given him a hug. And he's hugged him and he's whispered in my ear, oh, it's been a long time since I've had a beautiful woman like you reaching out and touching me like that. And it was just the creepiest, horrible, hence to say I didn't go back again.
Yep.
And it wasn't too long after that he passed away as well. And this is another thing that's frustrating. There's a lot of these knowledgeable fringe players, if you like. They're all getting on in age. And so many of them have passed away even since I started writing the book.
Yeah. And I remember you saying to me on the phone, Amanda, about how, you know, a lot of these people are not talking for different reasons, either because they actually know what happened and they don't want to go through and, admitting actually what happened. Some of it's probably fear as well, the declining health, and like you said, some of it dying. But I'll never forget you actually said that, like, you're hoping some of these people, when they're on their deathbed and before they take their last breath, are actually able to tell you what happened because they've got nothing to lose. And that's really hit me because, you were told multiple times, and I'm sure the family was told, and it was going around Sapole that, Geoff topped himself because he didn't want to give evidence against another copper, and, he couldn't bear going to court, when ultimately what would have happened is, if anything, it might have been a little slap on the wrist. It's not worthy of a suicide. It's not worthy of a man taking his own life. That's the end of part A with Amanda Schultz. Please continue listening to part B. And as always, I'm Matt Whitford. Thanks for listening.